Hi, I'm Steve Schwinn. The Supreme Court today issued a really important decision in the Trump administration's attempt to revoke the DACA program. The Supreme Court said that the Trump administration's attempt to revoke the DACA program violated federal law, and it therefore said that the revocation was invalid. The ruling leaves the DACA program in place. I thought we'd take a look at the decision. Let's go. When President Trump came to office, he said that he was going to revoke DACA. He said that DACA was illegal and that he was going to instruct his administration to revoke it. Let's start with the DACA program. Remember, in the Obama administration, the administration implemented Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, in order to defer removal proceedings for individuals, young people, who met certain criteria and who were brought to the country without authorization by their parents at a very young age. The program had two key components. One was deferred removal for individuals who met these qualifications. The other component was eligibility for certain benefits, including work authorization, certain Social Security benefits, and certain medical benefits from the federal government. In 2017, the acting director of the Department of Homeland Security revoked DACA, citing a memorandum from the Attorney General that said a portion of DACA was illegal. The Attorney General memo, in turn, cited a Fifth Circuit ruling that said a portion of a similar program, DAPA, was illegal. After the initial revocation, a number of individuals and organizations sued. One of the federal courts that was hearing the suits kicked the case back to the agency, Department of Homeland Security, and said, you get another shot at justifying the revocation of DACA. At that point, in 2018, the new Secretary of DHS issued a new memorandum that gave somewhat additional justifications for the revocation of DACA, but maintained the justification that it was illegal based on the Attorney General's earlier memo. When the case comes to the Supreme Court, the question is, did DHS properly revoke DACA? In particular, did DHS comply with what we call the Administrative Procedure Act in revoking DACA? The Administrative Procedure Act is a federal law that sets out certain processes and procedures that an administrative agency like DHS has to comply with when it engages in new rulemaking. The Supreme Court said that the Administrative Procedure Act requires an agency to justify its action at the time it's taking its action. It can't look to post hoc justifications. The Supreme Court said that the second justification by the second Secretary of DHS was not something that it was going to consider. It was going to look at the first justification at the time of the administration's revocation of DACA. Well, remember that first justification relied on the Attorney General's memo that in turn relied on the Fifth Circuit ruling saying that DACA was invalid. But as it turns out, the Fifth Circuit ruling said that DACA was invalid only as to the benefits that DACA beneficiaries receive, things like work authorization or Social Security authorization or certain federal health benefits. That Fifth Circuit ruling said nothing about deferred removal and the legality of the deferred removal component of the DACA program. So what the court said was the first secretary's justification based on the AG's memo was justification to take away the benefits that DACA recipients would have received, but not justification to take away the deferred removal that they were entitled to under the DACA program. And yet, because she revoked the entire DACA program, both the deferred removal and the benefits, what the court said was the justification, which was based upon the illegality of the benefits, didn't justify a revocation of the entire DACA program, in particular, the removal component of the DACA program. The court said that the Secretary didn't properly consider reliance interests, in particular the reliance interests of DACA beneficiaries who have now been in the DACA program for some time and have come to rely upon a continued benefit under the program. Said that these reliance interests, they might not be determinative, but they're something that the Secretary and the Department has to consider when they're thinking about changing policy in this way. So for these reasons, because the Secretary's justification didn't line up with the precise action that the Secretary took, and because the Department failed to consider the reliance interests, the court said that the revocation of DACA violated the Administrative Procedure Act and was therefore invalid. Now, it's important to understand that the ruling doesn't say anything about the validity of the DACA program in the first place, and it doesn't say anything about the constitutionality of the Secretary's action or the Trump administration's action. All it says is that when an administrative agency is going to make a policy change of the type that DHS made in this case, it has to have a justification that lines up with and matches the action that the agency is going to take. In particular, if the agency wanted to go back to the drawing board and try to revoke DACA or a portion of DACA moving forward, it certainly could do that under the ruling today. But if it did, it would have to justify its decision with a justification that matches and meets the action that the agency is taking. Justice Sotomayor concurred in the judgment, but she went a step further. She said that the agency's action in revoking DACA also violated the Equal Protection Clause because it impermissibly discriminated against Latinx individuals. The dissent in the case argued that the action in revoking DACA couldn't have violated the Administrative Procedure Act because DACA was illegal in the first place, and for the administration simply to revoke a prior administration's illegal act can't possibly violate the Administrative Procedure Act. Today's ruling means that DACA stays on the books as it is. It continues to be a program in the federal government, and DACA beneficiaries will continue to benefit under the program. But it doesn't mean that the Trump administration can't take this back to the drawing board. It certainly could, and the Trump administration could try again to revoke the DACA program or a portion of the DACA program. What the ruling says today is that if the Trump administration does that, it has to have a justification at the time of its decision that matches up with the precise decision that it's making in revoking the program in whole or in part. I hope this has been helpful in unpacking this case, and I look forward to seeing you next time.